Hi everyone, you might not be able to hear me. Attempting to multi-Zoom. So I'm on the England Handball site. Can you hear me? And Matt specifically?
Yeah, I can hear.
Right, okay. So what I'll probably do, Matt, we've just finished with the boys as I messaged you. So Cal and a few others are just back in. So I said we'd give them a couple of minutes to have a quick comfort break.
Yeah.
So I will facilitate it and I will press record. Over to you.
Cheers, John. Right, so let me share the screen. Yes, I'm Matt, everyone. Just following a little introduction. Worked in a lot of sort of team sports, football, rugby, England athletics and hockey, and obviously a tutor as well on the same course. Yeah, that's my sort of background. So hopefully if this works, share my screen. So is everyone now seeing the first slide? Someone just give me, Caitlin, you're on mic. Yeah, I've got 2 thumbs up. Thank you. Cool. It's all good. Right. So, yes, there we go. Right. So before we start, if you've got a pen and paper or notepad somewhere close, just write down 2 questions or thoughts or anything that you want to either ask me throughout or at the end to clarify on nutrition. And then as we're going along, it might get answered, so cross it off. Then if it doesn't, ask it when you feel it's like appropriate at the time, or at the end, I don't mind. So I'll just give you a few seconds to do that. So in terms of what I'm going to cover in this presentation, we'll look at things to improve your recovery from training and match play. Then we'll look at how we can fuel you to work in both of those aspects to full potential. Then look at how important hydration is. And then finally looking at just all the little things behind nutrition in terms of like the behaviour component of nutrition. So before we get started, if you can all jump on to Kahoot, enter that pin. This should work. I did it last time. Just a little quiz, 7 questions, just to see where people's nutrition knowledge is at, and we'll go from there.
Is there a link that they need to click onto, Matt, to get onto Kahoot?
If they just go, is there a chat place I can? Most of them seem to have found it. A lot of people are jumping in it now.
Right.
I've got the link actually, yeah. Post it in the chat. Where's the chat? Can't seem to get the chat box up. But if you just go to kahoot.it, anyone that's not got there yet, you'll be able to get there. Yeah, I can't get to the chat function, John.
So I'm tapping on the wrong keyboard.
Oh, hang on, I might be able to.
Oh, that one?
Sure. Oh, I've got to it now. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think you posted it or someone else. Yeah, cheers.
Yeah, that's me.
So it doesn't even paste as a link. All right. Numbers, how many have we got, John, in total? 27, so 25 in total minus me and you.
Yeah.
Cool. So 19. 6 missing. 5. Might have to leave it there. We've only got 18, but might just have to, oh, 19, 20, 21. Last few seconds, I don't want to, 22, 3, 2 shy. Anyone that's not in? Oh, 4, 1 more. People dropping out. Right, we'll have to leave it there and we'll get started.
Okay.
So if you've not managed to get in, just play along with like, just writing your answer down basically. Where's the little start? There we go. Hopefully. Oh, you need to see the questions, don't you? I'm an idiot. Of course it helps if I share that screen. Don't worry if the timer runs out, I'm an idiot. Yeah, that's my fault because I didn't show you the question. So, sorry about that. So basically the most important factor in nutrition is always the total amount of food you drink and consume. I've caught one person out, the only person that managed to answer. So that was basically my gist of that. We'll get to that later. Right, now hopefully you can all see the questions. You have only got 10 seconds though. Well, 20 seconds actually. Oh, so only 2 people got that right. Well done for those 2. We'll find out who they are. So that one caught a lot of you out. In terms of energy, or in terms of calories, is how we measure it in nutrition. Carbohydrate has 4 calories per gram, and fat has 9 calories. So it's by far the most nutrient-dense form of energy we've got in terms of nutritionally to consume. So we'll get into a bit of that later on, as it's the most dense nutrient you can have. However, for sport, it may not be the most important one. But well done for those 2 that got it right, who were Mr. Underwood and Alex. So well done. So this one's only 10 seconds, got to be quick. Woo! Boom. So there you go, a lot of you got this one correct. So like I was alluding to in the last little question, fat may be the most energy that we can get out of it, but in terms of playing handball and most sports and training, carbohydrate will be the predominant fuel because it's burned at a lot quicker. Our body can process it a lot quicker to get the fuel to create energy out of it and be used. So well done, everyone. Majority of people got that one. Protein is the best protein. We've got some music. Protein very rarely gets used as energy to fuel anything in very rare circumstances. And then fat is only used at sort of very low intensities, so like brisk walking, so to speak. Scores. Oh, 2 people have stayed on top, obviously. Ellen, Noah and Alice. Good. Ten seconds again for this one. Oof, clock's getting tight. Ooh. Good, so a bit of a mix. Some people could argue that carbohydrates potentially, depending on what your goals are and what you're doing on your day. So potentially, you could get a point for that hypothetically. Well done for the 2 people that put chocolate and crisps. I like it. But protein needs to be eaten at regular hits throughout the day. And the reason, I'll get into that in the presentation, but for those 10 that either knew that or guessed that, well done. You can be asked questions later on about that. Good. People might remain on top. So you are all athletes as well, by the way, in terms of defining your short time again. Good. So those that managed to quickly read all 4 potential answers, the correct answer is all of them. As young athletes and potentially soon to be adult athletes, all of these aspects here, which the presentation will cover, you need to eat more of compared to people that are just classed in research, classed as sedentary, so don't do anything, maybe just sit down most of the day, do a tiny bit of walking. Yeah, so all those aspects need to be improved or increased. 2 people on top, Alice still second, cool. Cool, good foundation from knowledge again, understanding of that. Whilst everyone was technically correct with single answers that they put, at certain stages you may be doing it deliberately to improve body composition, so the amount of body fat to muscle mass you have. As you're all still developing into adults, you can definitely hinder your growth and development, and then depending on how much training you are doing, if you're not fueling correctly and refueling, then the injury risk can increase. Good. I think we're on the final question. Cool. So the two answers that were possible answers, everyone got right. That answered out of the 21. So the 2 mechanisms are salt and sodium basically improve hydration. The behaviour aspect in red is by increasing our thirst. Obviously, you have to act on being thirsty and not just sit there and try and sweat it out. And then obviously when it's ingested, it will pull more water from our intestines into the bloodstream, then into the muscle, and helps us retain water. So well done, everyone. Good knowledge. 5 out of 7, Nathan. Well done. Close at the end, to be fair. Only just managed to win, but well done, runners up. 2 people. Well done. If I had a prize, I'd give you one, but I haven't, unfortunately. So well done, you 3. So if I now jump to, where's my presentation gone? Oh, there it is. That one. Go. Moving. There we go. We're moving. Right. So out of these foods, how can I see the chat function? So in the chat function, if you all want to tell me which one of these foods is the worst, or if you'd class it as bad, which is the worst. There we go. I've got the chat. Yeah, I've got it, John. Cheers. It comes up when you type. So if you can type the answer in the chat group, out of all the foods or drinks, Coca-Cola, we've got 1. Butter. Everyone's going for the Coke. All right, cool. Butter. All right, so Ben, you was the last one to answer. Why is Coca a bad drink or food? Do you want to unmute and tell us why, or your opinions?
Yeah, I said it's because it's got a high percentage of sugar, so it's like
I got a bit of feedback, but I think I heard the gist of that is because it's got a high amount of sugar in. and then you broke up a little.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right now. I think there's just some audio issues, so don't worry. Yeah. All right. One reason. Fair enough. We'll get into that later. Who else did we have? Who said butter? Luke, what was your reason for butter?
It's really fatty.
Yeah, it's definitely a food that's high in fat. Technically, you are 100% correct, yeah. However, the reason why I've asked you, my buttons work. The reason why I've asked you is because judging foods solely as single items and independently of the whole picture doesn't really mean anything in the general aspect of life or nutrition. Just because you have one can of Coke, it doesn't all of a sudden mean that you are instantly not healthy or that health's an on-off button. If you have butter on your toast, got a bit of feedback. It's very unlikely that that's going to contribute to a huge amount of health issues when you're older. If you're eating that full block of butter a day, then I'd be impressed, and I'd probably say, yeah, it might cause you some health issues because you might gain weight from it. But looking at food individually and out of context is something it's hard to get into, but hopefully this presentation will help you, that you can get to sort of looking at food like that as opposed to things as good and bad. And maybe a way in which you can start to grasp your head around, I don't know whoever I've stole this off on social media, but I agree with it, is just to think about food as what's higher in nutrition, so vitamins and minerals and other aspects of benefit of certain foods. Look at foods like that, and then have things that are maybe less nutritious, as opposed to labelling them so that there's maybe a negative association after you've consumed one of them, that you might feel bad about consuming a donut or half a pizza, even though at the time, say a social event, or all of you train pretty hard and do a lot of output, having a donut here and there or a few slices of pizza will not contribute to you sort of not becoming an athlete and not being healthy. But on social media, it's a minefield. So most of you, I'd assume, might be on social media. So just be wary of people labelling foods and asking them why it's bad if they do. Is the answer to that. Because nutrition is not sort of solid black and white, as I've alluded to. All those foods on that slide, what I've asked you to judge, they can all be incorporated into a diet whilst still being healthy and recovering to a high standard from your sport, and just living a general healthy life through diet. So particularly in what I'm gearing you towards, and the narrative of all those sort of slides and those little tasks, is, some of you may have heard this, is with nutrition you maybe want to follow a 80-20% rule. If you're not at that level yet at your age, don't worry, work towards getting up to that sort of split. And what I mean by that is 80% of your nutrition and the things you eat and drink should come from the foods that are on the left, in terms of when you look at the food, you know exactly what it is. And it also comes with additional sort of benefits like nutrients, micronutrients, and those things that help the body recover and function as optimally as it can. And then you've got the 20%, where that's the food that is more calorific, not as nutritionally dense as those on the left, but at the same time, it tastes really good. It mainly eat those around social events with your friends, birthdays, family, things like that, or when you just want to sort of relax. And if certain people believe that you should never eat a bag of crisps, me and them would never see eye to eye, because it just doesn't make any sense how someone that's playing sport, living a good lifestyle 80% of the time, can't have a bag of crisps that's only 200 calories, which is 10% or 15% of your total intake, depending if you're female or male. So that's why the 80-20 rule in my eyes and a lot of people's eyes works. The only issue is with the 20% aspect, all of those the foods that would fit into that category of not very nutritionally, they are just calorific. So you've just got to be careful with having your 20%, because you can easily overconsume it just because of how dense they are in calories. And that's mainly because most of those foods have a high amount of carbohydrates and fat, hence why they taste good. So those little bits of sort of overall approach to what I've just gone over, does anybody have any questions that they'd like to just sort of quiz me on or challenge me on? Even I don't mind, if they want to type in the chat box. If I can see it. Oh. So I'm just trying to get the chat box open. Don't think anyone. No questions in the chat box. All right, I'll move on. So in terms of the overall pyramid of nutrition, in terms of importance and the foundation of where most of your the foundation of nutrition and what's the most important step. A lot of you got this correct in the Kahoot. So at the bottom of the pyramid, calories, the total amount of those you eat, or just the total amount of food, will always be the most important factor for performance, for body composition, so how much body fat you have or lose and muscle mass you put on, and your overall health. That is one of the strongest and most dominant factors there is. So then once you've sort of understood that that's the most important bit and you are consuming a regular amount of calories to suit your goal, so if it's to maintain your current body weight and just be good at handball and fuel and recover optimally, you then want to start moving up the pyramid in terms of being more specific with these 3 types of foods, then looking at fruit and vegetable intake, and then maybe focusing on the timings of these. With the S at the top, the final aspect or the icing on the cake is supplements. It should never be the opposite way around. You should never be trying to focus on a supplement before you've even worked on the first 2 steps of the pyramid, and then obviously the other 2 steps. So the cake, if you picture the first 2, 3, 4 steps as the cake, will always outweigh or beat the icing, the supplement on top of the cake. And that's how you want to get your sort of mindset towards nutrition, which some of you may already have. But then the other aspect, so you've got all the numbers, all the physiological responses to nutrition and training. The other aspect is your sort of behavior and the psychological aspect of nutrition. You are all different in terms of your upbringings, maybe even obviously your cultures, the foods that you were given at childhood and you now eat. So you all have different mindsets, views and approaches to nutrition. So you've got to realize this and make sure what I'm saying today and anything you do in the future of nutrition is catered to your sort of approach and behaviors and lifestyle, basically. Because there's the perfect diet, if there is one, is to one that you can stick to and do continuously and consistently, judging on the factors that I'm going to tell you today. Other than that, there's no real magic bullet in nutrition, unfortunately, if any of you was hoping to hear that. But we'll get into some of this towards the end. So we'll jump into protein. And in the chat box, some people want to type what's the role of consuming protein. Go for impaired muscles, correct, yeah. 1 hour after exercise, all right, cool. Luke's been specific in there. Luke, can you expand on that a bit more if you want to unmute? What do you mean by that?
Is it because your body doesn't store protein well? So if you need it to repair muscles after exercise, it needs to be within an hour.
Yeah, brilliant. Especially the point of, you're 100% right that we cannot store protein in our bodies. So great knowledge there. We will get to that factor in a minute. And yes, you you definitely need some after exercise, and within an hour, I would say is spot on. So good knowledge there from you, Luke. We'll get back to that point because there's other reasons what you said as well. But well done for everyone that's answered. So if I can get back on there we go. So yeah, the main factor is everyone's typed in the chat box that answered is to repair and rebuild muscle tissue. This isn't, don't think of it as just because you've not lifted weights, for example. It doesn't mean you don't need to consume protein. Training, doing any exercise will cause damage to your muscles and bones for that matter. So then consuming protein then helps repair the damage that you have done, as well as repair and then rebuild so that you can either generate more force, run for longer to an extent, because you've allowed your body to recover and develop. And that's what the point of training and nutrition is. One other sort of minor aspect of it as well, it can support your immune function. So that little strange image there is sort of T cells attacking a virus. Protein helps slightly make those sort of immune cells. And then the rest of protein that you consumed, when those two functions have been ticked off, the majority of protein that's left over will just be burnt off and used. It isn't used for exercise. Unfortunately, it just gets burnt off and excreted. So it's not really a fuel source. Very, very rare circumstances would it be used as fuel, to the point where if you were an Iron Man doing like a crazy 40-mile run until you've burnt through all of your carbohydrate stores and then potentially some of your fat, your body would start to break down your muscle to get energy. But it's very, in handball, I can't ever see that happening. So yeah, it's not really applicable. So easy little thing here in the chat. Again, if people want to say what the difference is, it's a pretty obvious one as well, as a head start. So what is the difference between the two little groups of pictures that I've got? Protein and fibre. Yeah, correct, Cal. What? Be a bit more specific in terms of what's the difference between, so protein, do you mean on the left, and then fibre on the right group?
Yeah, so the left group is protein, that's growth and repair of muscles and stuff, and then the right is all fibrous stuff, fibrous foods, so that's like digestive system.
All right, cool. You're definitely right that there is fibre in the right side. Does anybody want to challenge maybe what Cal said about what is also in the foods on the right? Oh, there we go, Luke again, strong knowledge of protein. Yeah, Alice. So Luke and Alice, I would definitely agree with both of you. So, Luke, I'll pick you. Do you know specific? You're definitely right about animal and plant. Do you know specifically what's different between those two sources of protein?
Not properly. It was just more of an observation.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, it's a good observation. So the main reason the difference is, if my mic works. So in terms of protein research, if we want to call it that, the foods on the left, if we call them the animal-based protein sources, they're classed as a complete protein, which means it has all of these 9 essential amino acids, which is what our body needs from the diet. And when we include all of those 9 amino acids within a meal, or specifically from foods, we switch on that recovery process of our bodies repairing ourselves. Whereas the foods that are classed as incomplete means they're missing some of those essential amino acids. Some may be low in leucine, some may be low in lysine, so things like that. So the reason why they're classed as incomplete or lower quality is because they aren't a complete protein. So if that's the sort of diet you follow, we'll get into why I'm just getting into this, but you maybe have to start looking into this aspect more, so that we're giving the body all the essential amino acids to improve your recovery. And that's why I've sort of brought this up, which we'll get into in a few slides. Well done for those that answered. So another one here for you. In the chat box, we've got three amounts of protein. If people want to have a guess, if we say the one on the far left is 1, middle is 2, far right is 3, what are your answers in terms of the total amount of grams of protein would be in each one of these, or total amount of food, sorry. We'll have a look what some people say in the chat. Find it. Oh. Touch my head. Yeah, well done, everyone. Well done for the first one. Yep, no mistake. So seeing as I've given you all the first answer, let's just go for the middle, the second and the third one. What do we think the amount of protein are in that? Around 50 in the middle, around 80. 2 good guesses. 70, good guess as well, yeah. Second 75, third 200. Good guesses, Caitlin. Second 60. Yeah, some good guesses. 60. Good, yeah, some really good guesses. I guess potentially me giving you the first one might have helped all your guesses, but yeah. 180, far right, good, nice guess. So as I messed up, 120 grams is the roughly amount of those foods combined in terms of protein. 56 is the middle one, so some really close guesses with people saying, well, 70 grams is still close. A lot of people went for 60, so really good guess there. With this middle one, can anyone figure out where that recommended amount has maybe come from? Like, who recommends that amount for people? Is it for you as athletes? What is it for males? Is it for females? Anybody want to hazard a guess at who it might be for that amount of protein? Non-athletes, correct. So basically that's one of the government guidelines for how much protein non-athletes, as Lucas said, adults should consume on a daily basis. And in the research, there's a lot of disagreement that should be increased to help with sort of aging and maintaining muscle mass, as that amount of protein doesn't help adults retain their muscle mass, which is important for health as well as performance. So in terms of the final one, it's roughly 180 grams of protein. So I think someone got that spot on. Yep, Jake, well done, spot on guess. So the reason why I'm showing you this is because roughly on the right of the 180 grams, that's roughly what I consume on a daily basis, because I have certain goals for my sort of performance. And on the left is roughly, if you weigh sort of 55, 60 kilo, you should be consuming roughly that set amount of protein per day. And the reason why I say that is because protein and all nutritional recommendations are recommended on your body weight. So as you can see there, aim for 1.5 to 2 grams per kilo of body weight of protein per day. So if you do a quick sum, roughly, as long as you're in that bracket number of protein, so if you weigh 60 kilo, the top end, you would, for a long period of time, you don't need to eat more than 120 grams of protein. And even if you fall quite a bit short of that, you'd still be in that 1.5 bracket, which is still optimal and more than enough for you to recover on a daily basis in terms of protein from your diet. So in the chat box, does anybody think they're within that bracket of protein intake, that 1.5 to double your body weight of protein in grams? Any thumbs up, or if we can do can we do a thumbs up or thumbs down if you are? I'm not sure if we can do that. Oh, we can, yep, Jamie's got it. So Jamie, thumbs are up, Luke's in that range. And if you're not in that range, don't obviously worry. This could be a goal that you set in your workbook that you've got a session on after this. So well done for those two that are. If you're not, don't worry, we've got Jay, Alice. Oh, everyone's down the thumbs. Yep, good. So well done those that are. Good knowledge that you're doing this. So how does protein work? So Luke mentioned earlier that there's no store for the body of protein. Does anybody, or Luke and even himself, does anybody know what happens when we consume protein and how it works for us to get the benefit out of it? If anyone wants to unmute or type, have a go. No, cool. So this little graph. So basically, the body works, as you can see. You've got the little arrows in the bottom. When we eat a source of protein, obviously it gets digested, and you can see these black dotted lines as they get to the peak, and they're above the green line, as we say to speak. That's our bodies using that protein to repair and grow. Basically, it's called muscular protein synthesis. If you go on to university, study sports science, maybe even now currently, you'll hear a lot of that term. It basically just means that our body is repairing and anabolic. However, as Luke said, there is no store in our body for protein. So then, as you can see, that black dotted line then dips below the green line, which means our body is now breaking tissue down and we are not theoretically repairing. So then, hence you can see another spike of protein, and that process of sort of being anabolic and catabolic consistently occurs throughout the day. And that's, as Luke said, because we can't store protein in the body. So with that total amount that we've just gone through, you need to separate that into regular hits throughout your day to get the best out of your recovery. So not only just having it an hour after exercise, you also need to have it at breakfast, lunch, dinner, then maybe after exercise, then maybe before bed. It's just spreading that total amount out so you can get the best out of it. So a common meal in which most people lack protein is breakfast, which we can get into of how to solve it. Another question for everyone in the chat. So how much protein can you absorb in one meal? So thinking, we know how much you need to eat per day. So how much should it be? How much can you absorb in one go now is what I'm sort of trying to ask you. 25 to 35 grams. Nice answer, Jamie. Any more advances on Jamie's answer? 20, good, thanks, 20, around 30. 30 to 50, 35, cool, nice answers. 30, okay, 35, nice. Cool, everyone's around that 30 mark or 20, 25 mark. So the answer is, from the main man, Arnold, all of them. So it's a trick question, really. Our body will absorb all of the protein that you eat. It's a trick question from me, and it's a question that, or a statement that people might put out there, that your body can only absorb 20 or maybe 30 is the narrative, what people put out there. But what's the important factor is how much protein do you need to consume in a meal for that recovery benefit to be switched on, is what we're looking for. So as you can see by this graph, we've got 3 different amounts of protein. And the yellow bar of the threshold synthesis is where we want you to be, basically. So for the majority of you, 20 grams, and I would probably synthesis of switching on the recovery benefits that we need you to do within a meal. So that also goes to the notion to think just because something's labelled in terms of marketing that it's got protein in it, it doesn't mean you have to consume it. So I know there's products out there that have got like 10 grams of protein in, like protein crisps and strange things like that. Just because they've got protein in it doesn't mean it's beneficial or you need it. If you've consumed a chicken breast and it's in that sort of ballpark, a normal sized chicken breast will be, you then eating another chicken breast or a protein product 10 minutes later or an hour later isn't going to double your recovery. It just doesn't work like that, unfortunately. You've got to let the body use it and then get rid of it. But making sure you've got your protein in at least 20 grams. If you're a slightly smaller individual, you might be able to get away with less in a meal, but it's all about that total and then splitting it up into portions of roughly 20 grams, I would say. So out of all these foods now, which of them has the most amount of protein in? Salmon? Salmon, yes, nice. 2 people going for salmon, 2 salmon votes. Eggs, egg whites, no egg whites on there, just full eggs, but yeah. Oh, someone's caught me out, well done. So one person's caught me out. Caitlin, well done. So they're all the same. So they're all 20 grams of protein, which is that amount, roughly, that most of you need to be having within a meal to switch on that recovery response that we want. So those are rough amounts. You will have these slides, so don't worry about missing out if you need a visual to go back to. But as a rough marker, if you consume animal-based diet and fish as well, using the palm of your hand to gauge the portion of meat or fish you're consuming, as long as it's roughly covering that, and if it extends out towards the end of your fingertips and covers that bit of your palm, it's more than likely going to have at least 20 grams of protein in. So there's a simple sort of method that you can use throughout your lunch, dinner, and another supper if you have one, to sort of quickly gauge, am I getting a set amount of protein in? So as I mentioned earlier, if anyone doesn't consume animal products, vegetarian, vegan, aspects like that, this little Tetris grid sort of shows you the difference between plant-based or incomplete proteins, as mentioned, to sort of not being that complete protein. So what you need to do, if that's the diet you follow, it's not an issue. You've just got to look up, and I might be able to send a document about this as well, actually, that pair the animal plant-based sources of protein together that give you that complete protein, which is what all the animal sources do naturally. So there's 2 examples, of pairing up 3 different foods that will give you that complete protein. As all 3 of those foods are higher and lower in certain amount, that when put together in one meal, you tick the box and you've got all those essential amino acids that we need to get from the diet. And if anyone's got any questions about protein intake and plant-based sources, ask away now if you like, or unmute, or yeah. No, cool, no questions. Cool, so to summarise protein, aim for that sort of bracket. You don't need to go above that. You'll be safe in that range for a very long time. It's backed by research, and you're all a bit young, so you're quite sensitive to protein. So aim for that number, but don't fixate on definitely aiming for a set number, just be within that range. Eat what's needed to recover. So 15 grams if you're sort of a smaller individual will probably tick that box at your age currently. If you're slightly taller, bigger muscle mass, males predominantly, as you get older, you'll probably be in that 30 gram range per feeding. Try to consume it frequently. So every 3 to 4.5 hours, depending on how big that meal is. And maybe sooner after exercise. So Luke said within 1 hour. I definitely agree with that, and we'll get into that later. 4 versus 5 hits, either works. So if you split that, your total daily amount into 4 versus 5 hits, whichever suits your lifestyle the easiest for you to consume, I would say is the best option. Doing both of them is ample in my opinion, and it's more about making it fit your lifestyle and your education and training schedule. And then if you consume, or if you don't consume animal products and your plant-based sort of protein sources, you need to look into that, but also consume more in a sitting because they're lower quality as well. So we need to consume more in general as well, because they have lower quality again. So has anybody got any questions or you want to unmute or about with protein, just whilst you're on that topic? No questions. Cool. So we'll jump into carbohydrates. So when we say carbohydrates, obviously we spoke about the for energy. What do people think about when people talk about carbohydrates and just the general conversation of it? What are people's thoughts regarding towards them? If you want to answer in the chat box. Anyone got any thoughts? What do we know about carbohydrates? Obviously, we used for energy. Is anything else we've learned? Make me think of calories. All right. Lucy? Why is that pasta? Yeah. Lucy, do you want to unmute if you don't mind? Why does it make you think of calories?
I don't know. They're just like, because it's an energy resource. I know that when you have an energy, you need a lot of calories. Well, I think. So it just makes me think of calories. I don't know. Yeah, that's the first thought.
Yeah, that's good. That's what I wanted you to say. What do you first think of when you think of that? Do you think of do you think of it as like more of a not a good or a bad thing, but how is that you literally just think of it as like, oh, they're calories, or these are calories that I should or maybe shouldn't be consuming, or I need to be wary of?
Depending on the food, then wary of, but most of the time I don't really care. Like,
all right, good.
Yeah.
Good, yeah. Yeah, you 100% that these are the things. All food has calories in as well. So just to be aware of that, anything you eat will have energy and calories in it. So don't be wary of just carbohydrates. Also foods that contain fat as well. What else have we got? Pasta and rice as the main carbs. Yeah, I agree with that. I'll do that. Slow energy release. All right. Good. We'll get into 2 people with slow release. Carb loading, Luke. Yep, important. Digestion. Yeah, they do help things with digestion. So the reason why I've 2 people have kind of got what I'm just gonna get on towards with the slow release sort of aspect. We'll cover other aspects as well. Who has seen this or this graph, or maybe even carbohydrates referred to in this sort of narrative of sort of high GI and low GI? In the chat, if people want to give me a thumbs up. If not, I'll just explain it, or I might even get someone else to explain it. No answers. So I'm guessing the 2 people that have typed slow release have heard of the high and low GI. So do one of you want to unmute and just educate the rest of the room? Oh, maybe not. No? All right, cool. So I'll do it. So basically what this means is, as it can show you on the graph, there's certain foods that have been, or carbohydrate foods, sorry, have been rated on a scale to how much of a spike they cause in the glucose entering your blood, which then releases insulin for it to be stored. So does anybody have any criticisms of this graph and the overall approach of these high and low GI foods? Because maybe the narrative towards certain carbohydrates is you shouldn't eat high GI carbohydrates. Parents may have that narrative. I know some of well, I've only got 2 parents, but my parents have that narrative. Does anybody else's have that, or does anybody have any criticisms of this approach to labelling foods? No? Or nothing they can see on the graph that doesn't really make any sense to them? So there's one, if my mouse works. So there's one thing that's included in this graph and this scale. So chips, biscuits, cakes, ice cream, and processed foods, unfortunately, aren't just carbohydrate-based foods. So they also contain fat. So labelling them as high GI foods or high glycemic carbohydrates, they're not just carbohydrates. They also contain fat, which will cause an insulin release as well. So there's a big criticism there. Also, this scale of food, of how it was tested, was individuals. So all 26 of you went to a university and did this study. You would just be fed a portion of each one of these carbohydrates, and they just test how your blood sugar responded to it. And the reason why I'm sort of maybe getting you to not worry about what's a high GI and a low GI to an extent is because very rarely do individuals eat a plate of rice or a plate of potatoes or plain bread on its own. You'll eat bananas on its own potentially and little snack things like that. So the reason why is to not so to worry about having high GI sort of foods, because when you have it in a normal meal, like the picture of the salmon and the veg, which have protein, fibre and fat, the rate at which that food will get digested and therefore enter your bloodstream will be a lot lower than compared to where it would be on its own. It's very logical when you say that and when it gets put forward like that, but a lot of the times people again just judge foods independently. And specifically times as young athletes, you'd want to have foods that are digested a lot quicker for recovery purposes. So that was just me just trying to educate you a bit on sort of what you maybe have heard or people may say to you in terms of if they start judging you because you eat white rice, for example, and saying that's not healthy, for example, people might start to say that. So I just don't want you to have these negative views of certain foods that aren't bad for you, so to speak. But in terms of you as young athletes and individuals and hopefully want to improve performance as well as good health, carbohydrates in terms of your diet, majority of the time, you do want to be probably consuming foods that are, most of them probably will be on the lower scale, if that makes sense, but still white potatoes, white rice, pasta, etc. is fine. That those should be consumed as the majority or bulk of your sources, so to speak. And then occasionally, and at the right times, which we'll get into later, having the foods that are just sugar or fruit as well, is sugar as well, which is fine. But more the sugar that has no nutritional benefits to it. So things like sweets, isotonic sports drinks, there is a right time and a place for those, which we'll get into. And then in terms of the sugar that most people point out is quote, definitely not has any nutritional value, is the foods that are the drinks and products that are really high in sugar, that should be being pushed towards the very rare occasions that you consume them in your diet, just out of maybe a sort of treat or something like that, but not a regular incursion to make up your carbohydrate intake, if that makes sense. So in terms of how we recommend carbohydrate intake, again, it's based on numbers to your body weight. And I know some of these numbers might not mean anything to you, but I've got pictures showing you roughly what those amounts look like. And the reason why I'm showing you this sort of traffic light system for your carbohydrate intake is you can see at the bottom, we've got a sort of low amount of intensity and skill-based training. And then as your energy demands, we'll call it, as they progress up and they increase. So if you have training that's a double day, for example, or you've got back-to-back matches on one day or 2 matches on one day and then a match on a Sunday, you'd push yourselves up in terms of your consumption of carbohydrate to be in the sort of amber days, at least, I would say. And someone alluded to earlier, carb loading, this is that sort of those red days that sort of marathon runners that do the day before an event. But unfortunately, whether handball athletes need to carb load for an hour of a match, I would probably say not to, but most of you would probably at least be in the amber day before a game. So would anybody, I know you're only just getting back to maybe playing handball or maybe not even yet, so would anybody say they were doing this within their diets in terms of increasing their carbohydrate based on their training and output? If anyone wants to give me a thumbs up in the chat. Get a bit of praise from me. See the chat again. No answers. No. So again, this if that's not if no one's done this before, this could be something again that you maybe set a goal towards and look at focusing on, just so that you can get the best out of your training. But with carbohydrates, a green day does not mean that you don't eat any. Don't interpret that as a lower day means none. It definitely does not mean that. You're all growing, developing, and you need energy for that, which carbohydrate provides. So in terms of an example week that might look like your week, hopefully soon, if everything's getting close to normalish now. So if this is your sort of output and your expenditure in terms of these sessions and maybe game at the weekend, maybe more than one, the traffic light system again would be how you'd maybe sort of increase and decrease the amount of carbohydrate in your diet, if that makes sense. So basically, the more you do, the more you would need to consume to help support that either on the day or the day before. If you're not a big eater on a match day, whether that's nerves, you want to feel light, all those sort of reasons, that's fine. Eating a lot the day before gives your body time to store that and it will still be ready to use the following day. That's how it works. You can't load your body up in the morning for a 60-minute match. It's just a top-up day. So if you know that's yourself and you struggle in a game and any other sport that you may play at the same time, doing that the day before your competitive situation is a strategy that should help you. So in terms of what the traffic light days may look like in terms of a lower day, so if you're a 70 kilo athlete, if you're lighter than that, it's obviously going to be slightly a bit less food. Though roughly, this is the amount of just carbohydrates that you would consume to get that low end of three times your body weight. If you're 70 kilo, that's roughly what you could eat within a day, which most of you are probably doing. I would guess. You're probably eating that sort of 3 gram as a minimum per your body weight originally, or currently, should I say. And then just pushing up these foods or adding in these foods would get you to that sort of top end of a bit more, 4 to 5 grams. So that's a lower sort of normal day, so to speak. And then if you were to need a red day, and be careful about needing them and using them appropriately, it's a real increase in the amount. For a 70 kilo athlete, So you can see it's a lot more food in terms of the snacks and that sort of thing. So what can people notice about the foods that I've used as examples in this carb loading day or a higher carb intake day? What can you notice about them? Does anybody want to comment on that? No, nothing in the chat box? No observations of these foods or the types of nothing? Okay. No. So basically the foods here, a lot of them are lower in fibre. So the reason for that, if you're having to increase your carbohydrate intake considerably for a big day the following day, or on a day where you've got a double training day, you might want to steer towards carbohydrates that are a bit lower in fibre, so compared to whole grain carbohydrates. And the reason for that is just to allow your digestive system to process them and break them down a bit quicker compared to the whole wheat sort of carbohydrate sources, just so that it's easier for you to get that food in, so to speak. And as you can see, a lot of the snacks are considerably quite high in sugar, which isn't a problem because you need to get up towards your total to achieve that recovery and fuel your performance. So don't worry about that either if you're having one of these days. This could, if you have these days, these might be the days if your output's a bit more, if it's higher than normal, if it's a double day. This might be one of the days where you include a bit of that 20%. Like we've got an isotonic sports drink there, it might be you include a bit of sweets after you've trained or during, things like that, just trying to incorporate that 20% on the days where you've got more freedom to allow it to think like that. And then here I've just got a visual list to just show you what the amount of carbohydrates that are in typical portions of food, just so you can maybe see if you want to have meals that are on your lower days, what maybe they should consist of, so you can eat more, if that makes sense. So if you have a meal of sweet potato compared to pasta, the volume of potato you can eat is a lot more compared to pasta, just in terms of the calories and carbohydrates. So on a lower day, you might want to lean towards more the potatoey, but you can still eat rice and pasta and all that stuff, so don't worry. But you just can get more out of it, basically, or eat more, so to speak. And then on your higher days, you might want to gravitate towards more of your meals, including the foods on the right. So got the next aspect is what you should be doing before, during and after either a training session or either playing a match as well. Does anybody have a rough idea of the recommendations of what you should be doing before a training session in terms of nutrition? What may be some recommendations, or what should your meals look like and things like that? Does anybody want to hazard a guess in the chat box? Or what even you currently consume? No guesses? No one wants to? Oh, simple carbs beforehand. All right. Good, I agree. Normally don't eat before. All right. Jay, why is that? High energy foods, good, Ruby. I agree. I don't like to eat loads beforehand. Cool, that's fine. So the two people that have said they normally don't eat before, is that because of a digestion issue? You just don't want to feel, don't want to feel bloated. Cool, thought so. Is that, so if Jake and Luke, if you were training, let's say, I don't know, let's say, what time is it now? It's 3 o'clock. Let's say hypothetically you were training at 6 tonight. When would you normally have your last meal, just out of interest?
Say if I I don't know, say if it's like a 2-hour training session,
yeah,
I'd have maybe like toast beforehand, and then later when I get back, I'd have my like dinner. So
When would be your, so a little toast, what, like an hour before or something like that? Just something like
yeah, around hour, half an hour before, just so that not completely doing it on a empty stomach.
Yeah, cool, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I just keep doing that. When would, prior to that bit of toast then that you were having, when would be your, say, a meal be before that bit of toast, or would you just not do any
I'd probably say lunch. Say if it was a school day, they have like the canteen, so it'd be like a hot baguette or something like that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. No, that's a good approach. No, I was just making sure that what your reasons was and what you did beforehand. So yeah, Jake. Anyone else that has that issue and doesn't want to feel too full, that is perfectly fine to do. Which I'm going to get in. Banana, electrolytes, good. We'll get into some of those. Before, roughly in terms of an amount before exercise, you want it to be sort of in that ballpark. So 1 to 2 times your body weight. Depending on how close you have that, obviously dictates how much you eat. Was it Jake? Yeah, it was Jake. Like Jake was saying, he only has 2 slices of toast an hour or 30 minutes before, which is roughly about 34 to 40 grams of carbohydrate. And then if he has anything on it, which I'm pretty positive he does, he'll probably get up to that 50 gram mark, which is enough to give him a little top up. So that's perfectly fine. And then considering what he also has at lunch as well, his lunch meal will be in that bracket easily as well, probably more towards the 100 amount. So what he's doing is sort of works pretty well, especially for him. So he's been doing a good approach, what works for him, basically. So it's basically So roughly, in terms of getting it digested, and how long before training or match should you consume, to make sure it's fully through your digestive system, your meal, you're probably looking at 2.5 to 3 hours before. And that's a meal with like carbohydrates, protein, and a small amount of veg, just to add a bit of taste and nutrients. You're looking at that sort of period before. Again, high or low GI, it doesn't really matter, because you're not really just going to eat a bowl of rice on its own. Like Jake was having with his toast, he might have butter and jam on it. So again, it sort of reduces the GI effect of that meal, and it's fine. So that's sort of the prolonged periods immediately before, like some people have been mentioning. So we've had maybe someone has a banana, that could be sort of 20 to 15 minutes before. As long as you're comfortable with your stomach, that little top up of sugar is a great idea to do, which is fine. And this is just what I've alluded to there with the banana example. So really a 30 to 60 minute. Here you're looking for something, let's call it simple for a better term, even though I hate that term. So foods that are something like this, that are easy to digest, contain a good amount of carbohydrate, and that's ready and available to get through your digestive system and into your bloodstream, so that it can be used at the onset, and they burn off fairly quickly. So well done for those that are following this. Again, it might be looking at your pre-training or pre-match routine in terms of fueling it correctly. Could be a goal for you, because it should definitely feel the benefits in terms of you being alert and lasting the full training session. So during, this can either be a training session or at half time, specifically based on the time. So if it's longer than 60 minutes, we follow these sort of aspects. If it's a match, you could maybe override. I know a match is only 60 minutes. you could still go for carbohydrates in a competitive situation because the intensity might be a lot higher compared to just a 60-minute training session. So if it's just training for 60 minutes, most of the time, if you've done the correct fueling before, water should be more than enough. If it's a longer training session, or even if you've trained in the morning, this might be the second training session. In that fact, you might want to have something during. It can also be an isotonic sports drink, so Lucozade, Powerade, Gatorade, those sort of products. Those are fine as well. It's whatever you feel comfortable consuming whilst you're still on the move, and your digestion might be a bit different because you're basically moving and not a lot of blood flows there. But you don't need to try and consume a lot. 30 grams of carbohydrate isn't a lot, especially when it comes from like raisins or a sports gel. So that might be a strategy there that you can set as a goal as well. And then as well as one of these, water as well to aid hydration. In terms of after, what you should do, Luke mentioned right at the start, we need to consume protein. It's 100% right. You also need to replace what you burnt off in terms of carbohydrates. So it roughly should be the same amount as your body weight in carbohydrates. You want to do it, you don't have to do it immediately. So don't think the notion might come if anyone goes to a gym that you might see people consuming protein shakes within 7 seconds after finishing their last rep. It won't cause a huge effect if you don't have protein in the first 8 seconds of finishing your rep or training session. It's a prolonged window of recovery, sort of 24 hours that you need to be good with your nutrition with. So within that sort of 30 to 45 first aspects is sort of a good window. If you have double training days, like a morning and an evening session, that recovery window between those two sessions, time then becomes a bit more important in terms of you being closer to that 30 minutes, 20 minutes, because what you consume in that window will then be used later on in that evening for training. Whereas if it's just one training session, you've got a bit more sort of freedom and not so much time pressure to get that recovery fuel in. So a really good product or food, should we say, is flavoured milk, because it covers all the bases that you need to do in terms of a nutritional aspect to recover from your training and then refuel it if you're going again, or contribute to refueling the next day. And that is to just follow the 4 R's of recovery. So we've got refueling with carbohydrate. In 600 mils of flavoured milk, there is 60 gram of carbohydrate. So if you're close to the 60 kilo body weight, that amount is spot on for you in terms of getting that carbohydrate intake back, because it is milk with flavoured sugar powder in. That's why it's higher than normal milk in sugar. It will also have around 15 to 22-ish grams of protein, which again, for most of you, is going to tick that box for switching on the repair of the actual muscle now. And also milk is roughly 80% water. So it's going to help contribute to the sweat that you've lost during your session or match. And then finally, relax is, hopefully it might make you mentally relax as well if you're having something tasty or quite pleasing like flavoured milk is. What are some examples what people currently have when they've either trained or had a match? Do people tick those 3 R's, or do some people fall short, or what are some examples that people currently do? In the chat box, if anyone wants to give me an answer. Flavoured milk, yep, good man. Ham sandwich, water and banana, yep, so there you go. But that would definitely be a fine recovery aspect, as long as there's enough ham in the sandwiches, which may be an issue you might want to look into, but it's definitely, as a foundation, a good point. protein shake. So Caitlin, do we think, why do you go for a protein shake?
Well, I think it's all on one go then, do you know what I mean? Like, I can take it in one go. I'll obviously have something else, but that as well.
Yeah, yeah, just to make it easier. There's nothing wrong with that. I would just say, at your ages and all of your body weights, using protein shakes or supplements probably isn't maybe the best option for you for a few reasons. So if it's just a protein shake on its own, you are only having protein, which you need other aspects of it, so carbohydrate, for example. The other reason, it won't only be you, Caitlin, that's having protein. I'm positive of that, so don't think this is just aimed at you. It's just more educate people on protein powders and things like that. Milk is also important for you because it contains calcium. So as handball players, you have a lot of force going through your joints and body from the jumping and the sprinting back and forth on court. So again, choosing a dairy product option in this example can help repair your bone damage as well, which is also important. And then
when I said protein shake, I meant, you know, the ones that you can get, like you make it yourself, you put like milk, peanut butter, oats and stuff like that in.
Oh, right, yeah, so like a homemade smoothie thing.
Yeah.
Oh, right, there you go. Yeah, so you're probably ticking the boxes doing that, yeah, definitely. But yeah, that was just for anyone else that is just doing literally like the scoop supplement of powdered protein. You probably want to gear off of that and go for a more complete food source that have other benefits. And like some of the examples what everyone's put in, I know Luke's put a protein shake. I would maybe say gear towards going to flavoured milk, and just on the basis that if one day you maybe get to the sort of senior level in this testing, you need to be taking supplements that are batch tested to reduce the risk of you getting a doping ban from something being in that powder that shouldn't be there. And they cost more money because they have to be batch tested. So it might save you money not having protein shakes as opposed to just having milk or flavoured milk. It's fine. Some good answers. Chia seeds and yogurt, cool. Peanut butter and rice cakes. I'd guess, Lucy, you might be vegetarian by that answer. So Lucy, just with that, with your answer, and anyone else, the peanut butter isn't that high in protein. It's put out there that it contains protein, which it 100% does. That for you to get that ballpark number of 20 grams that we said to switch on the benefit, you'd have to consume 100 grams of it, which you won't be consuming anywhere near that. And plus, it comes with a huge amount of fat. So the reason why is to try and not view peanut butter as a protein source. It's got a little bit in it that will top up your amount, but I would try to maybe look at other options that are higher in protein, or add in other options to increase that aspect, because it's a low intake of protein, if that makes sense, Lucy, in that example. But a lot of people do that, and there's a lot of people that recommend eating peanut butter for protein, which is, if you look at the food label, you'll understand my narrative. Right, what's happening now? So within the first, after you've had that initial hit, within that sort of the first phase of recovery, if you want to call it that the liquid option doesn't have to be liquid, or whatever snacks you've got, then you probably want to have another hit of the 3 Rs within the sort of hour and a half to 2 hours after that original hit. Because again, it's a recovery window, or should we say an open door. It's not just because you've had something in 30 to 45 minutes, you now don't consume another meal until the next day, or you just consume like some Jaffa cakes, for example. You've still got to continue that mindset that you are recovering, and it needs to continually be focused on in terms of consuming protein, carbohydrates, and that sort of thing. So in terms of summarising carbohydrate intake, try to match your energy demands and your daily activities to your needs in relation to carbohydrate intake. Fuel your sessions correctly. So as you've noticed, fueling is all about carbohydrate, because high intensity actions, handball, lifting weights is predominantly fueled by carbohydrate. Fat is not burning at that intensity. So try not to have foods that are really sky high in fat before and after your sessions, because you're basically not going to be using fat. Doesn't mean you have to go zero fat though. It's just not going crazily high fat foods. Consume a 3 hours approach within the 30 to 40 or an hour if you want to, it's still fine. And then another recovery meal that ticks all those R's again within that sort of time frame. And then you just continue that approach. Has anybody got any questions about anything that I've said over that little section? No? Cool. Right, we'll move on. So, hydration. In the chat box, why is that important for, you can either go for health or performance. I don't mind which answers you provide, just why is it important? Any answers? Where's the chat box? Yep, correct. 100% there. For performance, want to reduce dizziness. So what, just to expand on your answer, is it DiSE? I'm terrible with names, so I don't want to butcher your name, I'm sorry. Say again, sorry? DiSE, right, there we go. Yeah, I'd have never got that, so thanks.
You still didn't, Matt. DiSE.
DiSE, I got it third time. Yeah.
It's an acute accent. I got it wrong already, don't worry.
Yeah, I'm terrible with names.
DiSE's used to it.
So just with your answer, what, as you put reduced dizziness, what is dizziness a potential sign of then? Because you've typed that.
Dehydration.
Yes, but on what in your context as a handball athlete, how can that affect your performance?
Concentration will go down, you won't be really focused, and you won't perform to your best ability.
Yeah, spot on. So great, strong answer. I totally agree with everything. Concentration, all those aspects are crucial for most performances anyway, and specifically with hand-eye coordination. So well done. Anyone else as to why hydration is important? Got one definite strong answer. No additions? Ooh. Too much salt? Ooh, is salt a bad thing or a good thing? Ooh. Do you want to justify what do you mean by too much salt?
I'm not directly sure, but if you're not having enough water, there's maybe too much salt, and that might not be a good thing when you're playing.
If you don't have enough water.
I'm not sure, but that's what I'm guessing.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. I totally see your narrative. I don't think your body you won't increase your salt intake by not having enough water, if that makes sense, unless you've consumed loads of salt. But the reason why I questioned it is because in a minute, salt's pretty important for hydration, which we'll get to. But yeah, it's a good point that you brought up salt, because there's a bit of confusion around it. So good, well done for that. So just to jump into the effects of why your fluid balance or consuming fluid regularly is important, is because if you are in a dehydrated state for most of your day, and specifically going into a training session or a match, you will only become further dehydrated because you have to sweat to cool your body down. And there's research that has been shown that you will cover less distance, which is important in terms of defending and attacking when you are in a dehydrated state. Your concentration, as we had a little conversation to earlier, will also decrease, which then can have an effect on your coordination, specifically hand-eye, which is crucial skill of your sport. And then it can also have an increase in your perception of effort, which basically means things become perceived as harder, even though they aren't, because you're in that dehydrated state. And it also makes your blood volume thicker. So if you have less water in your body, your blood becomes thicker, which therefore means your heart is pumping a thicker substance around. So your heart is working above a level it should be at already. So therefore everything again does actually become harder in terms of intensity. So there's some crucial reasons for performance as well. If you're in education, concentration is a massive aspect for you, being focused in lesson and working outside of lesson if you've got coursework and in exams, just simple things like that. So it's for overall health as well as performance hydration. So what are some of the signs of dehydration? Had one earlier of sort of dizziness. If you've lost a considerable amount of weight from a session, for example, if you have this available, if you don't worry. But if you sweat a lot, or if you've sweat a lot in the day for whatever reason, that could be a sign that you're dehydrated because you've lost a lot of water and you might not have put it back. A common one, which is quite true, if you're sort of towards the 5 or even the 4, you are going to be potentially in that dehydrated state. As you know, when you wake up in the morning, most people's urine will be at that end of the scale, which you can't avoid because it's just what our body uses water when we're asleep to do processes. So use that as a sign to act on and then monitor that throughout the day. I would say you don't want your urine you don't want to aim for 1. Just because it's clear, it doesn't mean you're hydrated. You probably want it to be aiming for 2, if I'm honest. Because your urine can be 1 just by downing a pint of water. It doesn't mean you're hydrated. It just means you've filled your bladder up and it's just passed straight through. That's all that means when that happens. So don't think because your wee is clear that you're hydrated. And then as we mentioned too in the quiz, the thirst, that also could be pointing towards that you're in a dehydrated state. If you've got two of these factors, so let's say if your urine colour is a 5 and you're thirsty, I'd probably start to point towards a stronger chance of you being dehydrated, if that makes sense. If you've got all 3 of those factors, then there's very true 90% chance plus that you are dehydrated. So think of it like that, for example. So the types of drinks, if any of you are studying BTEC Sport, this will come up in your nutrition module. So majority of the time you want to be drinking fluids that don't really contain much sugar in them, so there are no tonics in them, so they easily pass through our digestive system and intestines. Then isotonic sports drinks to be consumed necessarily, so these also pass into our intestines to be absorbed at an easier rate, should we say, or quite easily. And then the higher sugar hypertonic drinks that have a considerable amount of sugar in per 100 ml. Our body finds it maybe tough to pull that energy in from our intestines, and it might potentially cause you to dehydrate. And plus that's not easily for your body to use during exercise, so try not to consume them in and around that window of training or whilst even playing as well. Stick to the green and amber choices that are on the slide, basically, is my gists. So in terms of strategies for hydration and just trying to start your training session and your match hydrated, because that's the easiest thing to do. Just make sure you're starting it hydrated, because you will always dehydrate during it, because that's what the body does, sweat to cool us down so we can continue, and you can't stop that from happening. So after waking up, initially drink some fluids, water or squash is fine, just to sort of try and put back what your body's used overnight and you've just excreted. Drink it regularly throughout the day. Have a large amount with each meal as well, and then in between when you feel the thirst and need to. Before playing or training, have a pint or just under a pint, maybe a bit less if you're a smaller individual, an hour and a half before. Check. Be monitoring your urine throughout this sort of your day throughout in terms of the colour and the amount. If you're sort of light, clear, yellow and there's a decent amount of urine, you're probably in a hydrated state, which is where you want to be. Before playing, again, sip some. You don't have to have that 300 ml fully, but just bear in mind your hydration status as to what I've just said. Consume a little more. And then just sips throughout and before, just so that you don't have a huge amount of water in your stomach, basically, that can be bouncing around and make you feel uncomfortable. So they're just simple things to do before, so that by the time you get to doing your fun aspect of the day, you can do it to a good standard and you're not going to feel dizzy or have poor coordination, as we mentioned. So in terms of the opposite end, you've now played or you've trained and you're rehydrating. There's three sort of key aspects as to how the body sort of hydrates efficiently. And one of them is the total amount of fluid that you consume. So I know most of you might not have access to scales at your training, so don't worry if you do, but if you do, if you've lost a kilo of weight during a training session or a match, you've roughly lost a litre of water. So to put that back, you need to at least have a litre to 1.2, 1.5 litres to put that back. Another aspect, as I mentioned right at the start, is how quickly you consume the drinks following your activity. So again, if you down a drink and think it's going to get into you quicker, it will, but it will leave your body a lot quicker as well. Because once your bladder's filled up in the stomach, it gets pushed out into your bladder. So drinking that amount into regular intervals after you've trained has been shown to allow your body to retain more water, which is what we want to do. And then the two other factors that can support rehydration is, again, consuming other foods to slow down that absorption so that the nutrients pull water into our body. So carbohydrates and salt are two of those aspects that contribute to that, which if you're having the 3 R's, you'll more than likely have those other nutrients in there that will aid your hydration. And salt, if you really struggle with your hydration, I would say for all of you as well, actually, adding salt to your meals before and after training can also help with your hydration, as again, it pulls water into our body and it helps with a thirst sensation. So adding salt to your meals before and after training, and if you sweat a lot in general, that means you're losing more salt. So adding salt throughout most of your daily meals would also be maybe an appropriate strategy to aid your hydration. And for anyone that has electrolyte tablets, the main ingredient in those is sodium, which is what the majority of salt is. And that's the nutrient or mineral, that helps us retain water, hence why it's in any sport product, any electrolyte, Lucozade Sport, all those have sodium in that for that reason. But don't think you've got to start having tablespoons of salt. So, to summarise hydration, take actions on the dehydrating signs. As we've mentioned earlier, all of those signs, you'll have access to those. It's all about you taking that action and noticing it and acting on it, and not just thinking, I can't be bothered to drink. It's a simple thing that you can get a lot out of, and it can affect your performance if you don't do it. Drink regularly, it's that simple. Sip during training regularly throughout the day. Don't think it has to be water. Sugar-free squash is fine. Avoid those sort of high sugar energy drinks just in general for health. I don't think you want to be consuming calories from those. Rare occasions, like I've said, it's fine every now and then. But if these are a regular aspect of your diet, I would try and lean away from those so that you can get a more healthier diet in terms of nutrients and quality. And then use those isotonic drinks during intense training sessions or half time just to help your concentration and simple things like that. Has anybody got any questions on me whizzing over hydration aspects? No? Cool. So last little aspect relates to fruit and veg as well as fat intake. So we've got four nutrients on the screen. Can anybody tell me why these are important for you to consume as well, for general health and for performance as well? And whilst I nip to the loo, hopefully the chat box will be full with answers. So off you go. Nine helps. Yep, spot on. So we've had one answer. What is the time? John, what time are we on? Just out of interest. Correct answer though. Definitely helps with iron circulating the blood.
It's 1:45, Matt.
1:45. Right, I'll whiz through this. But yeah, one answer correct. Vitamin C for energy. Does it? Is there any calories in vitamin C? I'm just challenging you here because you're responding. Is there calories in vitamin C? Yeah, so good. I'll just challenge. That's what I'm doing. I'm not saying you're right or wrong. Would it help with energy process in metabolizing it? Potentially, it could do. So you might be right in that aspect. But vitamin C, the main reason why I've included that nutrient is because it helps with our immune system. So health, calcium is good for strength range. Yes, correct, Alice. Vitamin C is for like immune function health and fighting off colds and infections like that and reducing your risk of getting ill so that you can train. Calcium, 100% for your strong bones, well done. Handball, the sport, causes a lot of damage jumping up and down on those solid surfaces. Omega-3 is important for recovery again. Huge benefits to omega-3 in terms of brain function, joint, ligament, inflammation, all of those aspects, a huge amount of that. So there are 4 key nutrients that you want to sort of look to get in your diet. So as an active individual, we'll get into some of those nutrients. How many fruit and veg should you consume per day? Seven, yes, correct. I like it. First answer, well done. So as Caitlin said, I would say it's 7 as a minimum. The 5 a day is for the general population that just sit down and do a tiny bit of walking per day, and that's, again, it's still a minimum for them. As you as all young developing athletes cause more damage, so your need for more nutrients and vitamins are therefore higher, hence why it's pointing towards the 7 to 8 intake. So in terms of the best approach, all of these foods have huge amounts of benefits in them for health, performance and recovery. And as you can see, they're all different. They're all from a different food group in terms of the colour, vegetables, fruits. Some contain a large amount of carbohydrates, some contain very little. But the main thing to view fruit and veggies, try and consume meals or snacks that have a mixture of colours throughout the day, as all of those foods on there will have different profiles and benefits to you. So that's what I'm going to say there, because we're getting tight for time. With fats, most of you probably don't need to worry hugely about looking at specific types of fats, but the saturated and unsaturated fat types are the ones that most, or hopefully most of you, are consuming from your diet. Saturated fats aren't proven to be as catastrophic for health as they've said. That doesn't mean you eat a lot of them though at the same time. It's all about having a balance between the two. Specifically the omega-3, so oily fish and aspects like those. And then the group on the right, the trans fats, which are again the foods that taste pretty good in my opinion, are the one that science sort of wholeheartedly agrees on that shouldn't really make up a high amount of your intake, because they are cause some negative responses to the body when they're ingested. But again, that 80-20 rule, if what you're doing 80% of the time is that natural nutrient-dense food, having some of those foods every now and again isn't catastrophic for your life. So just picking the right time is all I'm going to say with that. And as long as you're choosing sort of meals from that 80-20 rule, you should cover having a ample amount of fat in your diet, basically. But don't be feared about not eating fat. It's energy dense and it helps give you a lot of calories to make up to meet your daily needs. And there's nutrients that are in fats, vitamins A, D, E, and K. If you're having those, you might be low in vitamins. When it gets to winter, you might be taking vitamin D3, which most of us and all of us probably do in this country. So having fat again will help that absorption of that vitamin. To quickly summarise, because I want to get into the psych bit of this very briefly. Aim for the 7 fruit and veg. If you're not there yet, just keep working your way up. It might not come for a few years. I used to be a fussy eater. It might take you a while to get to it, but just always try and find a fruit and veg that you like. Again, aim for that different coloured for different benefits. Try and incorporate fruit as snacks. Focus on veggies in meals. Aim to try and have oily fish 2 to 4 times a week. And then the variety of fats, and just limit those fun trans fats, unfortunately. So putting it all together, everything that I've just said in a nutshell, is your plate roughly 3 times a day wants to be something like that. So a decent amount of protein, some vegetables, some carbohydrates, and fats will sort of usually follow if you do those 3 things. This portion, carbohydrates, is probably going to increase pre and post meals training at the expense of decreasing your vegetable intake. You don't want to have a lot of fibre in those. You can still have some veg, but don't think about having a high amount of them. Also fluid, as we said, just regular at every meal. Snacks throughout the day to help get your energy levels up, that will mostly be carbohydrate and fat-based snacks. And then maybe some additional hits of protein on top of your 3 meals. Sort of that chocolate milk after you've trained or played. And then if you have a sort of high protein yogurt before bed, if you've not had a lot of protein that day, you'll probably tick that box and you'll be doing all the nutritional aspects that we sponsored. So that's I could have shown you this slide at the start, but showing people what they need to do isn't as important as to actually educating you as to why you need to be doing that. So that's why I've took the long way to get to this slide, basically. Right, on to the psychology bit. I'm skimming through it, so if you have any questions, you can either email me or put them in the chat and I'll post them back somewhere on a group email. So this aspect, it's important because, like I said earlier, you're all individual and you've all got to make it fit you in terms of what I've said and the food you like and etc., all those aspects. So don't think you've got, if you're not at that 80-20 rule yet, or if you're nowhere near any of the processes I've said, don't try and go all in and try and change everything at once. If you're not capable of doing that, don't do it, because that's where you fail and then you get tired of it and you never get into it. Just go for some small wins, which will set up in goals later on. It might just be starting off with increasing more protein throughout your day at those sort of time meals and focusing on that, and then moving across and up the scale of priorities. Don't also aim for this notion that you need to have a perfect diet, as I've said with the 80-20 thing. You'd rather, in my opinion, for the people that I've worked with, I'd rather people, quote, have a good diet 6 out of the 7 days, or that doesn't mean have a day of junk food either, just out of the week, 6 out of 7 days are fairly good, as opposed to people thinking my diet was perfect for 2 days. Consistent and majority of being good majority of the time always beats perfection for 2 out of the 7 days, if that makes sense. So just aim to be consistently good is my approach of that. Try not to have food as a reward system in either way. Either, I know it's rewarded in terms of birthdays and things like that, not like, and maybe at victories and things like that, but try not to use it as a reward system for when you're feeling down and labeling it. Just try to start to look at food as just food that you enjoy all the time, because that will help you psychologically when you get older. As I've said, make it individuals to yourselves. That's always the common approach for everything, but you know what you like and you know what you dislike. Try and make it apply to yourself. And then there's loads of research. You're going to do this soon. Writing goals down has been proven that you're more likely to achieve them when you write your goals down. So even if you write them in the workbook later, you probably want to write them pen and paper and stick them on your wall somewhere so that you can actually see them and you actually only focus on it when you open the workbook. So I would say actually write them pen and paper as well. So the SMART goals, this is the process. I'm not going to talk through this, but there's just 2 lanes for nutrition goals: performance and habit-based goals. So some of the goals, I was going to ask you to name some of them, but these are a few at your age and that I've worked with in the past that you might need to focus on, either performance or habit. You don't have to label them that, it's just picking those that might apply to yourself. So we've got the performance list on the left of sort of the nutrients and the portions and types of meals. And then on the right, we've got all the behaviours and habits that contribute to those performance factors of nutrition. So cooking, learning how to shop, making shopping lists so you don't waste your money, changing your snacks, focusing on sleep because sleep has an effect on your diet choices the next day, or mainly just focusing on that 80-20 approach. So these could be some of your goals, or the start of your goal, should I say, for your workbook that you may want to focus on. And then just some things to help with your planning. Some of you I know have moved to Loughborough, so preparing your meals ahead of time if you've got a busy day is definitely going to help you on Monday, potentially if you've got a busy day tomorrow. Trying to go to stores that are cheaper than Tesco, Sainsbury's and Asda. Aldi and Lidl are always cheaper, specifically for high protein foods. If you've got access for your parents to go to the wholesales, you can save a bit of money there with buying sort of chicken and things like that. And then there's systems that you can use to help if you really want to get into your nutrition, in terms of using the numbers that I've recommended earlier and following them through MyFitnessPal, or writing out what I've said earlier on a sort of a daily schedule, things like that. And if you do any of those, and if you want to bounce ideas off me, my email is the same as any other Loughborough College staff, which is my name, matt.dixon@lukehull.ac.uk. So if any of you want questions or help, just bounce it through. And if anyone's got any questions now, fire away, even though we're a bit tight for time, but don't worry about that. Yeah, and that's it from me. So well done. Thanks for all of you engaging. If anyone's got any questions, unmute or type in the box, I don't mind. Thank you, no worries.
And don't disappear quite yet. I'm conscious of people might be bursting for the loo as well.
Yeah, I was.
But yeah, I think hopefully you guys have kind of got a sense of just the sheer expertise and enthusiasm and passion that the team have got for your development. So thank you very much, Matt, for that. That was a whistle-stop tour in 2 hours of a subject that we could just spend weeks and weeks on. And it's a bit like sports psychology. And again, it's part of the reason why we've put these two up front. And I think, just from my experiences, if you've got, as Matt's referred to it several times during today, if you've got the mindset right and you start to integrate behavior change, then it changes your habits, then it leads to excellence, So it kind of is that, Matt, Bobby and Casper have all kind of, and I guess to some extent I have all said the same message, but just in a different context. So, hopefully that will have come through. I will address the issue around, or the probably the questions around workbooks in the next session that we're going to go to in 10 minutes time. Bobby said we'll start that at 4:10. And I think on that link, you just click the link and it takes you straight through. It doesn't send you an invite back as these ones have done. But thank you very much for that, Matt. If you ping me their presentation, what I'll do is I'll copy them all in on an email, and I'll copy you in on that, so they've also got access to your email address. Can pose any further questions, and again, just for everyone's sake, and I know we're bombarding you all with information. The plan is going forwards with nutrition, as it is with psychology, is to get you to hook back up with Matt in a little while and do a review of where you currently are. And then obviously to start to talk about particularly some of those behavioral habitual changes that you can make to how you deal with nutrition and hydration, in conjunction with collecting that evidence of the workbook. And then we'll also pick up another 2 consultations, let's call them for now. Let's just stick to that. Small group one-to-ones where, he can start to really help you refine what you're doing. And again, we're conscious of the theme of everything we're doing at the moment in all walks of our life, and the fact that you're probably not fueling for competition and training as you will do once things open back up. So, we want to obviously give you that support in the right kind of time. So we'll hold a little bit back for now. We'll plow on with some work, but obviously we'll give you some stuff to help you change your behaviors. So I don't think anyone has got any questions. I've just admitted Ruby just as we're about to sign off from this chat, but we'll start in the next chat in 10 minutes time. So if that's okay with everyone, thanks again, Matt, for that. That's brilliant.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks to everyone that contributed and chipped in. Well done. Made it a lot better for me. And all the best. I'll catch you all later.
And we'll see you all in 10 minutes, or I'll see you with Bobby in 10 minutes time. Okay, cool.